Okay, so what are their names? Names. River, okay. Who are you? We're glad when you old people. Something about young people, good thing. And as long as we're not salty, we're okay. uh, let's have a word of prayer and we will jump right into our Father. I just want to, we just want to be a place very much. I want to ask the Spirit to come, especially when I pray that the thank you, Father. Before I do the though, I did want to um that yeah, you don't hear me? I hear me. Is that better? Here I am. Yeah. There's the red X that says you are here. And here I am. So I wanted to share something just really quick because I think sometimes, and it'll kind of get brought out here a little bit, but um, sometimes I think it takes us a while to see the fruit of what it is that we do. And so it sort of has to do with this. We'll get into it in a minute, but I wanted to share this, and that is that I was able to, at Helping Hands, meet somebody who, for the first time, came to Helping Hands, and they asked to meet the pastor of the church. So, what do you know? I was there. So, anyway, it was good to meet. Rick is his name, and they have been convicted that the seventh day Sabbath is very, very important. And so in their own studies and so on. But they did check out one or two of the churches here in Glide, and they said, and he just went, nope. And that was his response. Nope. No, they're not. And so he said, I want to come visit you guys and see, in essence. And so the question for all of us is, are we going to say, well, Lord, help us to be the ones that are? So anyway, and sometimes we don't necessarily get to see the fruit of something that we do. In that case, we did, because they're feeling it as a welcome place, and now I want to come visit. So it's a good thing. So we have a good thing going on in that building back there. So we are today on Jordan River Rule number 8. Yeah? Everybody going to bring out their cheat sheets? Okay. All right. Then you guys are going to get to say them again. Jordan River Rule number 1. Okay. Number 2. Yes. All right. Number 3. All right. Number 4. Number 5. Are you getting all those? Okay. All right. Good. You have a cheat sheet too? All right. Okay. Number 6. You get to read number 6. Okay. Good. And number 7. And so our Jordan River Rule number 8 for today is taking all that into consideration. make sure we build a monument. So if you look at our scripture reading for today, that's what we're going to look at, is make sure we build a monument. So the priests were told, put your foot right on the edge of the water, and in essence, watch God go to work. And they did just that. And they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And they were to go to the middle of the Jordan, and then God's people were to pass by. So the priests were actually joined by, shortly after, 40,000 soldiers from the 2.5 tribes that were going to stay on that side of the river. And if we remember the story, right, they were told, you can settle over here, but before you settle here, you're going to come over here and help us take the land. And then once the land is established, then you go back and then establish yourself over here on this side. So could you imagine, remember the rivers at flood stage, could you imagine what that would be like, number one? But number two, do you think that you would pause or maybe even just move really, really slowly by the ark? Or would you be hoofing it to make sure and get out of that riverbed? I think we would probably be making sure we got out of there. It doesn't say they moved quickly by the ark, but it does say that they passed by the Ark of the Covenant. And so if you notice, before we enter the promised land, one thing that we're going to do, they did then and will do now, is we will always pass through covenant with God on our way to the promised land. That's key for all of us. But Joshua took 12, one from each of the 12 tribes, very large men, because it said that they carried very large stones from the riverbed itself, and he said, and bring it over here. And that's really, really big for the story, because they went back in to make certain, to show what it is that God had done here. But they wanted to make sure, memorialize it. And they carried them out, and it says that Joshua took the time to build a monument for the Lord. You imagine, put yourself in this scene. As soon as the 12 men came out, followed shortly after by the priests, and as soon as they were safe on dry ground, on the side of the promised land, that river just completely broke loose. Have you guys ever, have any of you been able to see a spillway that's just let loose? There was one that you can see it from Silverado Trail, and when they let loose that thing, it just goes. Where'd you, at Don Pedro? Yeah. I think I was able to see that when I was younger. Yeah. But when they let that thing go, oh, it is unbelievable. So imagine that, but it was a wall of water where it was completely dry, and then suddenly everything just broke loose. That's the scene that we're trying to create here. Now think about this for a minute. That wall of water ended up being the entryway. But as soon as that wall of water let loose, it made it so that there was no escape. There was no retreat. So what's the message here? Once we commit to this, it is all guns blazing, everything forward for Yahweh. And that's the message. At this point in time, once we are headed to the promised land and once it's time to enter, it's all forward. And there's no retreat. So why the stones? Why the stones for them? And why is it that we would actually maybe not use stones, but use other things? Let's read our scripture reading for today. Joshua 4, starting with verse 20. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones that had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. The purpose of the stones was so that people would say, what is this and what does it mean? And it also gives us the opportunity to tell other people what it means, what they mean. These monuments, what does it mean? And what we hope and pray for is the opportunity to say, this is what this means. That you might always fear the Lord your God. And hopefully we all know this, but if you don't, I'm just going to very quickly touch on this. This is not fear like I'm so afraid of God. This literally translated means to reverence with awe. Like, oh, that's my God. This fear isn't fear and trembling. It's to understand who God is and give him the reverence and awe that he deserves. But these monuments are to show the fulfillment, perfect fulfillment of the promises of God. Perfect fulfillment. And it's to show that in everything God is faithful. And we didn't end up in Sabbath school saying this, but we can say God never ever withholds an answer. Ever. But sometimes the answer is the one we don't want. And I really don't like, and it is a 4-letter word, by the way. Wait. Because sometimes that's the answer. Wait. Give me time to work. And I don't know about you, but I don't like that. Alana will tell you this for sure. I don't like waiting for surprises. It's like, did you hide a Christmas gift somewhere? God always fulfills his promises. The only thing that we as human beings have to wrestle with is what we're going to do with sometimes the time frame that we need in order for him to work within his timing and in his way and within his will. And I don't like to wait. So what are these promises that we're referring to, this entry into the promised land? If we go all the way back to Genesis chapter 12, we're going to read verses 7 and 8, and it says this is Abram. He hadn't been called Abraham yet. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. And where were they standing at that point in time? They were standing in what ended up becoming Canaan. So he, to Abraham, way back here, is saying, I'm going to give your descendants this land. And interestingly enough, why would you take me all the way out of the land just to end up getting me back into it? Well, why did we have to leave the land as human beings in order for us to end up back in it? Because we sometimes have to go through our wanderings in order to realize how much we need. Verse 8, for there he went on toward the hills. From there, he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. This is going to be a common theme for Abraham. And if we follow along with the Abrahamic covenant, guess what we're going to do along the way also? We're going to build an altar. We're going to build a place of worship. So, by the way, this word Bethel, this place where Bethel was, it says Bethel was one place, Ai was on the other. Ai was a place of defeat, but you know what the word Bethel means? The house of God. Bethel means the house of God. So over here was the house of God, and over here was the city that we got overthrown. And then skipping to Genesis 13, verse 17, go, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So now we have the promises of God. But from Abraham to this point in time is quite a bit of time. God's people had to go through this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And finally the Lord said, it's time to enter the land that I promised to Abraham way back when. For I'm giving it to you. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. Do you see, wherever it is that Abraham went, he always made certain that it was evident that God, the God, was worshiped here. And that was part of his legacy. His actual physical legacy was, people were like, we knew where Abram, who it later became Abraham, we knew where he was because there was always a place established where worship of the true God was going to happen. Always. And that's crucial, isn't it? That everywhere we go, that it's evident that the one true God is being worshiped. So I think of my journey in life so far. If you had told me even 10 years ago that I would be right here, right now, I don't think so. I would have done that too. I would have laughed. Well, maybe not laughed, but. So I've had for 20 plus years, I've actually had this desire to preach, and I did guest speaking and stuff like that. That's as far as I would have ever dreamt it was going to go. And then now suddenly I go around having people call me by this name of pastor. And I have to tell you, it's something that I'm still settling into, that name, pastor. It's like, Lord, you know what? Only by your grace that I be even remotely worthy to. But God does have a sense of humor, doesn't he? He does. So, but I will say this, and this is not the easiest thing to do. But I hope and pray that the monument that I can leave is that wherever I have gone, the gospel of Jesus. That's my desire for the monument of my life. Do we as a people do that perfectly? Not even remotely close. But by the grace of God, guess what? I can just say, I hopefully left some people who desire to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And if that's the case, then you know what? That's the monument that I'd love to have happen. But some of you could say, well, yeah, but I'm not a pastor. Yep, you're not. Guess what? Every single one of us, all of us, are ministers. Every single one of us. And every single one of us can build a monument wherever it is that we go. Every single one of us. And will it necessarily be where you're up front of a group of people trying to be a spiritual leader for people? Maybe not. But at the same time, all of us can lead somebody to just say, I want to know Jesus. And that's our monument. And you know what? The stones of the monument are the little experiences that we have where we can say to people, this is how God's worked in my life. And when we say, this is how God has worked in my life, by the way, our personal story is really hard to argue with. It's really hard to argue with. I mean, you know, there's some people who, they just like to argue. My parents actually told me that was me. But we can all choose to build a monument to God, and that can highly, highly, highly impact people. So later on, we'll get into what that looks like. But there's something that's really key, and I'm really, really glad to see young people. I'll say it again. Because part of our monument are these guys. That's part of our monument. And we have a responsibility as, I'll use the politically correct term that I was shared, as seasoned people, it is our responsibility to cultivate and prepare these next generations to know the Lord and to see that there's other people setting up these altars just like Abraham did, these places of worship where they know that they're loved, but they're also pointed to the next generation. And so Revelation 14, verse 13 speaks to this. We're all alive today, and I'm really glad to see you. But this is speaking of people who, after they're gone, what it is their legacy is. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor." And here's the key, for their deeds will follow them. That's our monument right there. Our deeds that we do toward people who are coming from behind us, they are how our deeds are perpetuated. So I want to illustrate that. All of us know the name Martin Luther, right? Okay, we're going to do a little history lesson. You ready? And of course, I have cheat sheet, so I know. But what year was the Reformation kicked off and unleashed, shall we say? Because it wasn't just kicked off, it was absolutely unleashed by Martin Luther. What year? Na, 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 na. What's that? Did you ask Siri that? Okay, whatever your thing is there. I saw you. He just tried to hide his phone. Anyway, 1517, Martin Luther absolutely unleashed the Reformation, and it completely transformed the German church. Would you agree? But guess what? The ripple effect from the German church transformed the entire church of the world. So, but as that ripple effect goes out, these chain of events, monuments were built for the Lord. Places of worship, altars were built for the Lord. So Luther had a big effect on a gentleman named Philip Spener. And then Philip Spener had a profound effect on August Hermann Francke in 1727. Now we're talking, what would that be? 210 years later. Francke, in faith, he had over 2,000 children that were being taught in the schools that he founded on Christian principles. That's pretty profound. 210 years later. And then another 100 years later, and some of you may know this name, George Mueller. George Mueller just was absolutely blown away by what it is that Francke's schools, 100 years later, his schools were still going as a legacy. And he was already off the scene. And here comes George Mueller, and he ended up living at one of those schools. And he looks around and he says, "This is absolutely amazing seeing God go to work. I want to do this very thing." And so he leaves there and goes to England. And of course, if you've read the book and you've heard the stories, George Mueller was a massive, massive man of faith. And he is from the 1800s. But today, 2026, we're still talking about the massive faith of George Mueller. Do you see the ripple effect? It's huge, huge ripple effect. One man said, "I am going to build a monument for the Lord, and I'm going to stand fast to it." Hundreds of years later, the ripple effect is still going. And we think to ourselves, well, you know what? Our little pond is so small that I don't have really that much of an effect. I will guarantee you that Martin Luther thought that his pond was, he thought his pond was pretty small. And Martin Luther is still, to this day, being spoken about as a giant within the confines of the cause of Jesus. So here's the question then. Do we underestimate our effect, even if our pond is small? We can, but you know what? I think from this day forward we should. Because no matter how small it is, it can still be a monument that's going to point. God doesn't care how big or how small. And we might not have the privilege of seeing it come to fruition. We might not. And more often than not, I would say, do you think Martin Luther was able to see some of what it is that his little thing that he did that he thought was very little? He maybe saw a little bit of it. Do you think it would absolutely just boggle his mind that 500 plus years later, there's still people that are functioning under that? Don't underestimate. None of us should underestimate, no matter how big or how small, what kind of effect it can have for the kingdom of God. Samuel understood that. 1 Samuel 7 verse 12 says this, "Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer, saying, 'Thus far the Lord has helped us.'" And that word Ebenezer actually means stone of help. And so here, this Ebenezer, this stone of help, it's acknowledging that in order for any of us to have any success, we need to have the help of God in order to. And I will say, the world that we live in right now, and us seeing prophecy fulfilled right in front of our eyes, we need an Ebenezer. Because there's stuff coming to our world that we don't even fully understand. We think we do, but we don't necessarily fully understand what it is that's coming. What we're told is this: it will be a time such as no man has ever known. Well, what does that mean? We don't know yet. We haven't hit it. But either way, if we have this stone of help, we can also make sure that not only is it a stone of help, but it's a monument for other people to lean on that same stone. And part of our monument is the legacy that we want to leave behind. So Psalm 71 verse 18 says this, "Even when I am old and gray," yes, yeah, "do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come." That is a big part of what God's people are called to do, to make certain that the next generation see it and hear it. And here's the other thing. The next generation also needs to see that there's a God who actually truthfully does do what he says he's going to. So does that mean that we're all going to succeed at this perfectly? Nope. So what that means also, hopefully, is the next generations also see a people who are actually understanding and growing in. Because I think that as a people, as human beings, we really we like this idea of discipline, punishment, retribution. And I think we really need to also be able to have a very solid understanding of grace and mercy, because it's been extended to us far more times than we even understand. So practically, what does that look like practically? And by the way, what I'm going to share is going to be 3 things. And so it's not an exhaustive list because there are so many different ways we can do it, but I'm going to focus on 3. So, but we need to have these questions answered when we do anything practical for God. And it's this: what are the deeds that I want to be remembered for? Who do they point to? And the next question is it going to be me, or is it going to be? Because if it's me, then it's going to become a source of pride for me. If it's him, it's going to be a source of building his kingdom. So number 1, we can share our personal testimony. This is how God has worked in my life. So that person who's inclined to argue, and we say, God worked this way. God was mightily working in my life this way, and he did this and he did that. And then they say, no. It's like, can we actually dismiss somebody's personal story? We can try, but it's really, really difficult to dismiss somebody's personal story. So the big thing for us is, can we have a short version of what it is that God's done in me? And that's pretty powerful. I mean, somebody who goes from this drinking, drug partaking, just carouser of a person, and then suddenly they're this person who doesn't have any desire for anything like that. And now God is actually moving me down a pathway that's completely different than that. That's powerful. That is really powerful. Whatever that looks like for us, if we have just that little short version of that, it's a big thing. And number two, we can give to a cause that does a big work. So sometimes we could be called to be a part of the work directly, and that's good. But sometimes we maybe just would give to that cause. So let me share. There's a man who he had an extremely successful business, and he was giving thousands of dollars to this particular camp. And this camp was a little island to where you would actually, when you came to this summer camp, you'd be taken out to this island, and you would just live isolated for your week of camp. And this camp had hundreds and hundreds of young people give their lives to Jesus Christ. Total. That's a good thing, isn't it? So this man, he shows up at this camp, and he seems to look just kind of off, kind of forlorn. And so a staff member came up and said, "Hey, how are you doing? Where are you at?" And he invites the man to the evening program. And so this man is sitting there just absolutely weeping. And so this staff member comes back over, and he says, "What's going on?" He said, "I had this amazingly successful business, and it is completely, and this only thing that I have left. Because I remember contributing to this. I just wanted to see reminded of what it is that I was giving to." That night, there were nearly 200 young people that were going to be baptized that night. And so the man, he's just weeping, and he's realizing that even if my worldly business failed, the money that I contributed to the cause of God will not. And sometimes that's maybe going to be our place in it. But here's the statement that the staff member shared to this man: "If this is all you have left, then you are a rich man." And sometimes maybe we will be left with that. And God says, that's enough. And God will provide. And so I think most of you, if not all of you, know our friend Joe. And sometimes what we need to just do is share a little Jesus. And so, and some of you going, "Well, why don't we share a big Jesus?" Well, we could share a big Jesus, but that doesn't fit. Because Joe, everywhere he goes to the cancer center. Joe's actively fighting cancer. In fact, Tuesday he's getting ready for a major surgery for that cancer. And he has these little figurines that are about this big, little Jesuses. And everywhere he goes, grocery store. I was in a store with Joe, and somebody's like, "Hey, you're the little Jesus guy." And then I'm in Costco, and I'm in Costco, and there's this display right here, and I see a little Jesus there, and I see a little Jesus over there, and I'm like, "Where is Joe?" And I kid you not, here's Joe going. And I walked around the corner and I said, is that you putting those Jesuses all around? I caught Joe in Costco putting little Jesuses all around Costco. The people at the cancer center are like, do you have more of those? Where else were we? We were somewhere else. And the lady says, do you have any of those? And Joe goes, yeah. And he pulls out this handful of them. She goes, can I have a few of those? I want to hand out a little Jesus. And Joe goes, here. And he hands her a handful of them. And she goes, well, I don't want to take that many. And he goes, I got a few hundred at home. Sometimes maybe sharing a little Jesus is. Sometimes. And you know what's amazing to me? And Joe would probably be just absolutely bothered by me bringing him to the forefront because he doesn't like that. And you guys know that especially. But as he's battling cancer, Jesus is more important than even his battle with cancer. Right now, he's just like, I don't really care. I mean, it's like until my last breath, there's little Jesus. And that could be a big monument, couldn't it? Even though it's a little Jesus, it could be a big monument. And here's something. That stone that came out of the riverbed. But there's a more important stone, isn't there? Acts chapter 4, starting with verse 11, says this. Jesus is the stone that you builders rejected, which has become the cornerstone. We need to make certain that whatever it is, the monument that we're going to build, it needs to have Jesus Christ as the chief stone. We need to keep him there. And so it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with him. Verse 12, salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. There are people who are, and Alan, when you did the reading this morning, it said, that people need a safe space and stuff like that. And initially, I have to tell you, because that word right now, safe and space and all that stuff like that, I just saw an eye roll. It's become a buzzword, right? We all need a safe space. Anyway, sorry for being sarcastic, but but the truth of the matter is it is the truth, right? Sorry for my pronunciation and tone of voice, but it is something to where we need to know how we can be saved, right? So it's something that we need to know how we can be saved. But this whole buzzword of safe spaces, it's been abused. But you know what? There is a place of safety. And Lori's not going to let me not laugh through this. People do want to know that there is a place of safety, though. And it's not the buzzword. It's not the buzzword. It's Jesus Christ himself. Verse 13, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. And there is where the monument comes in. Because if, in fact, we're building out of stone these monuments, you need to build it out of the Christ. But since they could see the man who had been healed standing there with them, there was nothing they could say. And when people are healed by Jesus himself, by contact with him himself, there's nothing that they could say about it except acknowledge, well, this is a problem. So now they are up against a choice. What they chose to do is say, don't talk in that name anymore. Otherwise, we're going to punish you. Or the other choice just might be, I want to name that name all the time now, because they could see that these guys had been with Jesus. And the power that came with it, somebody was completely healed of something that nobody could heal it except for God himself. And they knew that. What if we did that? What if we did that? Wouldn't that be something? So let's close with a couple of questions. Lord, what is the monument that you want me to build for you? It may not be this position here to where you occupy, well, I can't say the pulpit, but you occupy this position of pastor. But what if it's just something that is just this consistent act of kindness that people say, what is going on with you? Absolutely. Our character is transformed by the character of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And am I going to make certain that when I build that monument, it's going to be a monument that unquestioningly points to him? Those are the questions that I think we can wrestle with. And so just a quick closing, and that is, there was a man that moved into a new neighborhood, and he didn't have anybody helping him move in except for he and his wife. Just these, they were kind of little people. And so another man and his family, they came over and helped him move into his house. Didn't say a word about Jesus, but they sure showed his kindness. And when it was all said and done, the man said, I can see your God in you. Can you come over to my house soon and introduce me to him? Didn't say a word about his God. Or did he? He spoke powerfully about his God, and this man said, I want to know your God. And so hopefully every single one of us can actually have it so that we have the opportunity to say, let me just tell you a little bit about my Jesus.